Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a comparison between two classic Spydercos for you. Both of these are knives that I love. Both of these are knives that are essentially classics, albeit the Military 2, which is what we're using, is the same footprint as the original Military, but with a compression lock and with a full stainless steel liner allowing for four-way repositionable clip, which had not been an offering on the original. The Manix 2 has been unchanged, or the Manix 2 XL has been unchanged for quite some time. This, of course, is the crewwear version with the micarta scales. And that does bring me to one sort of important caveat that I need to make on this video. I am not going to do a direct steel comparison for this reason. There are a number of variants available in both of these. So just off the top of my head, obviously there's the standard S30V version. I'm confident that both of these are available in Spy 27. Both of these are available in crewwear. I want to say there's an S110V version of the Manix 2. There may be others. Anyway, the point in all of that is to say that because of the variants that exist out there, for whichever one of these is most suitable to your needs, you can probably, with a little bit of time and a little bit of searching, get the one that's in the steel that you particularly like the most. All right, so we'll look at this in a couple of other ways. So we'll look at ergonomics, we'll look at edge geometry, we'll look at cutting at length, we'll look at those kinds of things where, you know, we'll pretend that whichever one you happen to like the best, both of these are in the same steel, and now it's just a matter of figuring out which of these is most suitable to your preferences and your needs. All right, so let's start off with size and weight and how these are going to carry. Both of these are very substantial knives. And so let's grab the ruler out here and take a look. The Manix 2 XL is going to come in at pretty well 9 inches right on the nose. All right, if we switch these out, you'll see the Military is longer, coming in at 9.5, just a little hair under 9.5 inches overall. And so we've got the longer of the two being the Military, and that's going to have some impact on the blade length. So you can see here we've got 4 inches of blade here, and in terms of cutting edge, you know, we're looking at about 3 3/4 inches. If we switch over to the Manix 2 XL, we've got just a hair under at 3 7/8, but then the cutting edge is going to drop down to 3.5 inches. Okay, so cutting edge, we've got, again, now I've forgotten my number that I just gave you guys. How is that possible? There we go. 3 3/4 inches of cutting edge and 3.5 inches of cutting edge. So if, I don't know, you're always cutting a fruit that is exactly 3 3/4 inches long and you need that length to reach all the way through, that may be the deciding factor for you. If there's some other important reason that you need as much cutting edge as you can get in your folding knife, well, there may be other knives that you'd find more appealing than. Anyway, maybe then you go with an XL Voyager, okay, which is going to kill both of these in terms of cutting edge. But the Military does edge out the Manix 2 XL just by a little bit, by 1/4 inch in cutting edge. Now, edge geometry is going to be a little more similar. Look, Spyderco definitely aims to make blades that cut. You can see that the blade stock is very, very close. All right, the Military is just a little bit thicker. All right. And in terms of edge geometry, it is very, very close. Okay. The Spyderco comes down. Come on. All right, I'll have to back this up a little bit. There we go. The Spyderco does come down to a slightly finer tip. All right, which translates both to piercing power as well as toughness. Okay, so Finer tip is going to break a little bit easier. You can see, actually I'm going to have to hold this in place, but you should be able to see how much this deforms when I start putting pressure on it. Right, and you can see there's no deformation at all. This just quite easily slides into that foam ring. Try the same with the Mannix. And yeah, there is a little bit of noticeable difference in the amount of pressure required to penetrate that foam. If we switch this the other way and we start using the cutting edge, all right, you can see I'm definitely cutting in. I'm leaving a little bit of a mark, and it took that much pressure to do that. Switching over to switching over to the military. All right, there's still some deformation. All right, finally, if we pretend this is like a tomato, and I'm going to do slicing, very minimal pressure is required with both of these. If you're wanting to carry a folding kitchen knife, both of these are actually going to work pretty darn well. And that does bring me to the primary discussion that I want to have about blade. By the way, one of these may just be obviously more appealing to you. One of the things that is just a reality of knife collecting is some designs are just going to connect with us while others are not. For me, I happen to love both of these designs. I love the feel in hand. I love the slimness and length on the Military 2, while at the same time, I love the girth. I love the hand-filling sort of just comfort, sort of feels like a lazy boy chair for your hand on the Mannix 2. So I love both of these designs. Not one of them doesn't just, jump ahead by leaps and bounds for me. But again, I understand that's not going to be the same for everyone. In terms of blade performance, these are very, very close. If you really need that thin, slicey, stabby, and just if you're trying to optimize for that, the Military is probably a slightly better option for you, but that is not to say that the Mannix 2XL doesn't slice really, really well. It's marginally, and I mean so marginally, it's hard to communicate, but as you saw, this is a little more pressure in that penetrating motion, and just a little more pressure in that slicing motion, but very close. All right, so that's how the blades stack up to one another. Again, both are going to have great edge retention. Let's imagine these are both S30V. Well, S30V is a great everyday carry steel, and the other options that are available are going to also be great performers and are going to optimize for different purposes depending on what those are. So having said that, let's move on from the blade itself and the size of that blade over to closed dimension and how these are going to feel when carried in your pocket. This is going to be a bigger difference. The Military, okay, is not small. Okay, take a look here. We're still talking about, an inch and, let me turn these so I can read the ruler better for you. About 1 5/8 inches. Now, the Mannix is going to be 1 7/8 inches. Almost, I can almost get to 2 inches depending on where I put my ruler. All right, so in terms of size in pocket, the Mannix is going to be much more noticeable. By the way, both of these are going to have the standard Spyderco clip, but there are tons of Lynch and MXG and other clips available for you. By the way, the closed length on both of these, we've already mentioned, almost 2 inches, close to, a little over 1.5 inches, a little under 2 inches. So that's certainly going to be a difference for you. The length on this is going to be 5.5 inches on the Military and just a hair over 5 inches on the Mannix. So if for some reason, the depth that something sits in your pocket is important to you, by the way, that's going to be a little more pronounced. All right, let me just quickly grab a microfiber cloth here. I think this will perfectly serve for what I want to do next, and that is just slide this right under here. Of course, it's going to have a little bit of, this is a Seneca claw. It's got a little bit of elasticity to it. So Manix 2 is going to, Manix 2 XL, I should say, is going to sit out of your pocket a fair distance. Not to say, by the way, that the military is not, but if you look at the two of these, the carry profile is much more noticeable on the Manix 2. Now, having said that, there are a number of aftermarket clips available. So I'm going to only bring in my Para 2 because this MXG clip would fit both of these. All right. And once you switch to that, you're going to be dealing with, okay, quite a bit less. So if we can imagine in both of these scenarios, the military is going to disappear completely and the Manix is going to still have a little bit exposed, but much less. All right, so keep that in mind. So in terms of carry profile, all right, the Manix is going to be much more girthy in pocket. The military is going to extend further into your pocket. Both are fairly prominent in terms of carry profile, but both can be remedied to a degree, all right, by going to an aftermarket clip. And there are many, many, many aftermarket clips available that fit the three-hole pattern for Spyderco. I showed you that one MXG example, but there are a number of others that you could certainly make yourself, that you could certainly have available to you if that was an option that was really important to you. All right, now, while we're talking about how these carry, one of the things we're going to care about, get it, carry, care, I'm a poet and don't even know it, right? Is going to be the weight. Now, keep in mind, this is going to be a little bit lighter than the standard G10 version. So we've got 4.8 ounces on the Manix 2 XL, and we've got 4.2 ounces on the military, and that is with a full stainless steel liner. Okay, that's pretty impressive. Now, there are, one of the reasons that I bought this knife in particular is that I do plan to switch out the scales. I want to go full titanium with this and then do some other aftermarket hardware. So this is kind of a project knife. I wanted to do this video before going through all that because once that's done, it's going to be much different and some of these numbers are going to be harder to compare. So 4.8 ounces, 4.2 ounces, both of those are pretty impressive numbers. Frankly, under 5 ounces, under 7 ounces, I actually don't care. I know some of you feel differently about that, okay? And so if the weight of your folding knife is a big, big issue for you, again, you're going to probably lean toward the military, all right? Now, the next thing we have to discuss here is going to be the lock on these two. So we have the ball lock on the Manix 2 XL, which is a very fun, very satisfying, and also very strong locking mechanism. Then on the other hand, we've got the compression lock. Now, compression lock is a very strong lock by all accounts, performs really well. There's lots of tests out there. I think Blade HQ has done some. I don't think Demco went through these tests with either one of these knives, at least not to my knowledge. If he did, please comment down below, and even better, please leave a link down below if there's one of those Demco tests out there. Specifically, this is the lock I'm interested in here. But even, I really don't think I can remember Demco testing a compression lock. Could be wrong because, you know, I frequently am. But if that's the case, you know, we can know. However, what I'm going to point out here is that generally, the general consensus out there is that the ball bearing lock is a stronger lock than the compression lock. Is it so much stronger that this becomes a deal breaker for everyone? Probably not, but for some where lock strength is the thing that must be optimized in all folding knives, then yeah, the Manix 2 XL is going to be the winner, okay? So right now we're standing at, you know, depending on what your preference is, slightly, you know, we're leaning toward Manix 2 in terms of some toughness and durability. We've got a slightly slightly thicker tip here if that's going to be a big issue for you. Now, it's not a thick tip, so I'm not suggesting that you go out and start prying with this or start, using it for, turning screws or throwing it at the concrete floor. This is still a tip that can break, but we've got slightly more robust blade, slightly more robust lock, okay? Slightly thinner, slicier blade, slightly weaker lock. So, and again, don't take that to mean that I'm saying, this is just so much stronger than this, and this is so much slicier than this. They are dangerously close in both of those categories. The other thing we have to comment on, or that I'm going to comment on, is, how about fun factor, fidget factor? The compression lock is definitely a popular lock because of the fact that it is so enjoyable that people just love to fidget with their knives, and this certainly allows for that. Is the bearing lock an equally fidgety lock? Yes and no. It just is different, okay? I will say the detent is very satisfying. The Spidey flick works great. The thumb roll works great. The, release the lock and flip with a flick of the wrist works great. You're not going to get all of those with the Mannix. You're going to get the Spidey flick. You're going to get the open. It doesn't work as well. The compression lock is not really known to be a flickable deployment method. Okay, tends to work a little better with the top button lock variants of the compression lock that we've seen recently, but both of these are pretty fidgety. The Mannix is going to take a little more. Okay, you're going to have to get your fingers on there. The spring that actuates this lock is pretty stiff, and so it's going to take a little bit of effort. The compression lock, once you're used to it, again, is very intuitive, very fun. In terms of fidget factor, the military probably just barely takes it. Although if you have a ton of crossbar locks and you're just a crossbar lock guy, you're used to this motion and that's how you open lots of your knives, that might be a deciding factor for you. But for me, I find the military just a little bit more satisfying in terms of fidget factor. All right, so Mannix for strength, military for fidget factor. Finally, let's talk about ergonomics. We've already talked about riding in the pocket, so that was one of our key handle discussions. In terms of construction, these are closer than they used to be. If you recall, the military used to have only a small amount of metal in it to accommodate the liner lock. Now we have full stainless steel liners on both sides, and that does allow for four-way repositionable clip. And of course, both of these in their correct position, which is tip up, right side carry. If you need tip up, left side carry, that's a good option for people who carry their gun on their right side or have various different concerns. Of course, the Mannix is going to be fully ambidextrous. If you're a lefty, okay, I believe there are definitely left-handed versions of the Para 2. I want to say there are probably left-handed versions of the military too. But the Mannix is going to be automatically more lefty-friendly because it's a fully ambidextrous lock. Okay, all that's required is move the clip to the other side and you're boom set up for left-hand carry. If you need to move the clip on the military, you are still stuck with a compression lock that's more, or at least potentially more well suited. I have a difficult time doing this, and I think probably other lefties would as well. You sort of got to do this finger pinch thing, and yeah, it's not really conducive to left-handed deployment, left-handed closing. Okay, left-handed opening obviously is going to be the same. So you'd be actually switching. So Mannix gets the points for lefty friendly, although that's not a primary consideration for me or for most right-handed people. And that happens to be, it's just one of those functions where, you got a lot of righties. And so you expect the market to service them a little bit better than lefties who are less prominent and therefore less lucrative. Okay. Moving on from that, let's touch on ergonomics. Both of these are very comfortable knives. I have to say, both of these feel really, really good in hand. Now, the slightly proud liners on the Manix 2 XL and the jimping that is throughout is specifically designed to really give you a ton of grip, especially when wearing gloves, and it 100% delivers in that regard. So this is a super, super grippy, somewhat aggressive knife that really aims for retention. When you're holding on to this and getting a lot of hard work done, it is not going anywhere. Now, the military, having fully nested liners, doesn't have that jimping that comes proud of the liner. Instead, it's going to try to achieve retention primarily with shape, and of course the jimping here on the ramp, which we're used to seeing with Spydercos. The choke up position is also got a ton of jimping there. All right, so in this position, it's a little more. Back here, it's a little less. However, okay, both of these are well designed for retention. The Manix gets the nod in terms of that extra jimping that if you're wearing a pair of gloves, this is absolutely locked in. This is still very much locked in, but slightly less. Now, you know, those slightlys matter here, okay? It's nuanced. And if you were to, you know, somehow put both of these in a clamp and hang from the ceiling holding both, you'd probably hang on to the Manix just a little bit longer. All right, that's the kind of slight difference I'm talking about here. In terms of comfort, both of these are good and are going to work well for prolonged use, but the Manix is going to be slightly better, and it's slightly better because it's just girthier. So we've talked about this before, but the more within limits, okay, if you have, you know, size large hands the way I do, this is going to feel a little bit better. It's going to give you a little more positive return because you just got a little more handle to grip onto. Okay, and that makes a difference. Obviously, neither one of these is going to be quite as good as, you know, something like, you know, the 4Max or the 8010, where you've got this great big, very rounded handle. But short of that, both of these are highly, highly ergonomic handles. All right, the last thing that we can really touch on is. That really was the last thing that we can touch on, but I guess the last thing we can touch on is sort of overall feel. And I will say this, the military is a slightly longer standing design, all right? Certainly though, I think we could, I don't know guys, in terms of design popularity, the smaller version of the Manix is wildly popular, and the smaller version of the military is also completely prolific. And so we're dealing with two classic designs. Interestingly, though, they're kind of, you know, backwards. So the Manix 2 XL came after the Manix 2. The military came first, and the paramilitary 2 came second. So we're kind of, you know, in one case, this design has informed this design. In this case, this design has informed that. So in terms of iconic design, the military probably gets the nod and it's going to be more familiar to people. Of course, now there's even a paramilitary 3. We haven't come to a, you know, instead of a Manix 3, I suppose we have like the Sage series, which would be very, very close. And again, very, very popular. Eric Glesser, Sal Glesser. In terms of all of that, that's a really tough call to make and highly subjective. I suppose for me, I lean just slightly to the Manix because I like that girthier, heavier duty feel, while at the same time recognizing that probably the general knife enthusiast is going to be slightly more favorable to the military. All right. So how does all of that come out at the end of the day? Well, as you saw as we worked our way through there, if you're really trying to optimize for toughness and durability, you might lean toward the Manix. If you're willing to sacrifice that slimness in pocket, and if you If you want to be, almost there, almost to the point of being, the toughest, craziest overbuilt knife you can. Of course, if you really want to optimize for toughness, you end up looking for a cold steel anyway. But if you're sticking to Spyderco, right? So you're going to get a slight bump in, toughness and durability and hard use in the Mannix. But man, you are so close in the military that this is a very tough pick. So here's what I would say. If you need to get a very tough, very usable, very capable knife that doesn't make you sacrifice much, but comes in a very lightweight, easy to carry package, the military wins out. If carry and ease of and comfort of carry is your primary concern, or slightly more important to you, than the military. If toughness and durability is more important to you, then the Mannix. If you're a true knife enthusiast, if you love knives and love Spyderco, then you're gonna get both anyway. But I hope this exercise was helpful to you, even though these are such close competitors that it's really hard to name a definitive winner. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll talk to you soon.